So maybe I'll pray for us and then we will start, okay? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time. We just ask and pray that you would help us to know your word and to understand what you are saying to us in our lives, God. And we ask, Lord, that as we go through just some of the stuff that you want us to talk about, that you would really help us mature in our spiritual life. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay, cool. So, we've talked about the overview and we've talked about, what it means to be grounded in the Word. That's what we talked about last time. And today, so this is, last week we talked about being filled with the Holy Spirit. We had like one whole session with like the combined group, so it was a lot bigger and it turned into one sermon. So I'm just thinking about, how do I cover everything, but I want to make sure we go through the things that we need to go through. The next time we meet, I'll talk about maturing in the inner life, okay? But today we're going to do Grounded in the Word Part 2, all right? Grounded in the Word Part 2. Now, when I think about, people growing spiritually and, helping you grow and doing your devotions, etc., and all that kind of stuff, one of the questions I have is there are always like some reality of key barriers that stand in the way, okay? So this is not just for you doing your devotion, but sometimes there are like these barriers in our spiritual life. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to address like a few of them today and then just see what out of these, which really connect with us. I think when it comes to like the key barriers, the more aware of them that we are, whether or not you've experienced them right now you've experienced them before, or I'm sure at some point, at least one of the 6 will really impact you at some point, okay? I'm trying to focus, sorry. Okay. Thanks. That's all right. Sorry. Yeah, my brain is really bad. I can only think of one thing at a time, Yeah, okay. So I just want to look at a few key barriers for us, and then later on I'm going to get you guys to discuss which one kind of speaks to you guys the most when it comes to some of these key barriers, okay? All right, cool. So one of the first things that come with helping us grow spiritually and identifying some of these key barriers is this, okay? The disappointment of ungodly examples. Disappointment of ungodly examples. I can't tell you how many people have left church, left faith, not really walking with God, or some people who are passionate for God. Some of my friends were on the pastor route, going through Bible college, but now not really a Christian anymore. Why? The disappointment of an ungodly example. So this is why the Apostle Paul actually says, 1 Corinthians 4:16, therefore I urge you, follow my example. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Philippians 3:17, brothers together, follow my example and observe those who live by this pattern that I gave you. This idea of people who have talk about God and talk about Christianity, but then when, I'm not going to name names, but people who are famous Christians and they fall or stumble, the reality is the potential there to impact your spiritual life is actually quite high. Okay? So maybe you've experienced this, maybe you haven't, but in the event that one day you face this, you see a Christian leader or someone you looked up to, and then they have fallen in their faith or just not being the person you thought they really were. What they said didn't align to how they really live behind closed doors. There is a spiritual disappointment. A disappointment that kind of gets laid in your heart. He's disappointed with, I'm not sure about my Christian life, actually. I won't name names, but the really famous case that happened of late? Like last year, 2 years ago? No? Yes? Okay, anyways. One of my friends used to work for this really famous, I'll just call it a really famous apologetics ministry. Okay? Enough said, okay? And if you don't know, don't worry about it. So he worked for this ministry that was really well known, and the person, had a private, like a life that no one really knew about. Anyway, so he was a really well-known speaker. He came to Singapore, and as soon as he came, he was speaking at these huge events. I was actually organizing an event for my friend who was actually my age. We're friends now. And he was telling me like how he went through almost like this PTSD because of it. And I said to him, how did this happen and what do you think was going on in this person's life? And my friend was like, that's what I've been trying to reconcile, Paul. He had to take time off to deal with it. Our Christian life at times is so interconnected with people that we've looked up to. And I'm just saying one of the issues that can happen in our spiritual life that we need breakthrough in is don't let the disappointment of an ungodly example, don't let that take root in your heart. I remember I was doing these little Bible studies with people and people sharing the Bible and all that, like small group. And one of the participants, this young girl, she was always like, whenever she read that, it was always really negative. God is really mean. God's really evil. And that was always her reflection. God is like, it was just so bad. Everything she said, it was just bad about God. And then, so I said to her, why don't you send me a list of your questions? I'll try to answer them. So she sent me a whole list of theological questions, okay? Really difficult to answer. And I Zoomed her. This was during COVID. And then I said, what's really going on? And then she opened up a little bit about what her previous church was like. And it was really bad, her previous church. And how disappointed she was with certain leaders and whatnot. And how it was just... And so I just prayed for her and I just said, don't let that take root in your heart. And then after that, I don't know what transpired in that conversation, but after we just prayed for that or dealt with that, or just very quickly just prayed and talked about it, the next time she shared her reflection of the Bible, it was completely different. Like, it was like, oh, God's so good. Oh, this verse is amazing. And I was like, scratching my thinking, what happened there? I don't know what happened. I think what was happening was the disappointment of ungodly examples that was exposed, dealt with. Okay? So I'm just telling you, maybe you haven't experienced it yet, but I'm just telling you, you will. Some Christian leader, some pastor, somebody will disappoint you. Okay? Heads up. Okay? But at the end of the day, how do you deal with this? So if this is you, how do you deal with something like this? How do you deal with something like this? So for me, why someone falling from grace, and someone, even well-known church pastors, if they have a hidden life, and why does it disappoint me? Firstly, because I've come to acknowledge that in the human heart, you and me, we have the capacity for syncretism. You know what that is? Syncretism meaning like many loves, many things. Meaning the same heart, the same person who could build a temple for God and see the presence of God fall in this temple that he built. I'm talking about King Solomon here. The guy that had such a wonderful encounter with God is the same person, same heart, the same guy who wrote a Proverbs and told people what about wisdom is, about fearing God. He's the same person that actually had 700 concubines, 300 wives, and he ended up worshipping idols. So my point is, when it comes to the disappointment of ungodly examples, just know in the human heart, we are capable of loving God one day and then loving sin and the world the next. So likewise, when there is a famous Christian, in my mind, I know they're never perfect in the first place. I know this person's, I already know there must be something going on, not there must be secret sin, whatever, but every person's heart has that capacity. So that doesn't fix the problem, but it helps me become aware of it. I approach people, then you have your view of examples is a lot more measured. So at the end of the day, I know, if King Solomon, King David could fall, the great heroes of the faith could have a double life, then how much more me and you? Okay? Not saying that excuses it, but the point is that's one way that being aware of human nature and the reality of human nature helps manage, deal with, and kind of deal with the disappointment of ungodly examples. Okay, cool. First one, clear? Disappointment. Anyone? Have you been disappointed generally? Anyone ever been generally disappointed with anything? Just one person. Never. No one else has been. Wow, really? No one has been disappointed with anything. God bless your lives. Fantastic. Okay, great. Okay, moving on. Second one. Second barrier in your Christian life. Doubts of unanswered questions. Okay? The doubts of unanswered. I don't know where you are in your Christian life, but you might have questions about the nature of God, the character of God, predestination. Does God predestine people to hell? And you might struggle with some of these questions. And that's normal, that's fine. Like 2 layers of questions, 2 layers of doubts that can happen. Like one is a theological layer, which is a lot more in the mind. Like, yeah, how does God work that way? Why, like, how does this actually work? How does God choose us and we choose, like, how does that work? Or whatever questions you have. You might have heaps of questions about God right now. If I did a Q&A for anything, you might have heaps of questions that come at me. So there's one layer which is theological questions and doubts, like, does God really do miracles? Like, did this actually happen? I'm not sure about that, okay? And those doubts need to be addressed, okay? You need to, the word that Paul uses is to discuss and to reason, and that word is actually really important to help you grow in your faith. You need to reason with your faith. It's actually really important. So there's that kind of doubts that need to be addressed. And other than that, there is another kind of doubt, which is more like, God, if you loved me so much, why did you have to let my mum or my dad, my grandpa, my grandma, why do they have to die that way? And that's really difficult. Or why did that relationship never work out? Or why did this happen in my family? Why did that have to happen? And I tell you, that one is really difficult to deal with. Okay, in the Bible you see this. Psalm 73. This guy, it says, truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, this is what it says. But as for me, I know God is good, but for me, this the psalmist says, my feet had almost stumbled. I almost got shipwrecked in my faith. I would almost stumble. Why? Because my steps had nearly slipped. This is the reason why, for I was envious of the arrogant. He was looking at people who are really proud and being like, I want to be just like that. I became envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. Meaning, he was like, I know God's good, but you know what almost made me stumble? When I see good things and prosperity happening to people who are evil. And he couldn't deal with that. He's like, God, why do good things happen to bad people? I'm trying to be a good person and love you, and I'm trying to be pure in heart. I know you're good to people who are pure in heart, but seriously, like, I look at people who hate you and blaspheme you, and why are their lives so good? Why did they get the job that I always wanted? Why did they get that relationship that I always wanted? Why did they get that promotion or that, those opportunities? It's just so unfair. And that was the wrestle. And I don't know about you, but all of us in this room have had at some point doubts in our faith. If you haven't, okay, but you will if you haven't, and it's good to wrestle through them. Don't throw them aside, address them. Think about them, talk about them, and address them. I actually have some doubts about God's goodness. And this guy is like trying to deal with that. God, I know you're good, but this is really unfair. He keeps saying, for they have no pangs until death, meaning they've got no problems in life until they die. And he says their bodies are fat and sleek. Okay, the word fat there is not in a negative sense. Back in those days, to call someone fat was actually like a compliment. Hey, what's up? You're looking fat. Okay. Anyways, don't go around saying that. But the word meaning fat and sleek means that like your life is prosperous. Your life is that's what it's like. Hey, you're looking prosperous in a good way. I know today's context it ain't a compliment, but back then it was a compliment. Hey there, you're looking prosperous. Don't say that either. That's not going to be nice. All right. And he keeps saying, for they are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Meaning they don't go through any pain. It's just not fair. So sometimes those are questions of the heart. And then later on he deals with it. He talks through it. And for him, he actually comes to a point when he comes to the presence of God. And he goes, but when I entered your presence, that's when he gets his revelation. And he gets this resolve for your doubt. So as much as you will have doubts, they need to be addressed and fundamentally resolved. If they get resolved to a certain point of satisfaction, your faith will grow. Otherwise, if those doubts are always there, one doubt after the other, it will shipwreck your faith. If you have doubts about God's goodness, over time, it will shipwreck your faith. So one of the things in helping us read the Bible for ourselves is addressing the doubts that we have towards God, towards His character, towards maybe some intellectual or theological unanswered questions. And then in another sense, maybe something more personal, I remember when I was in Singapore, I was going through doubts. I was like, God, why did you even call me here in the first place? I mean, life isn't easy right now. It's not fun. It was fun at the start, but then it got harder. I'm like, why am I even doing this? And it got to the point where I even said, why am I even serving you in ministry? What would my life look like if I stayed the PwC path and continued in management consulting? I would have made this much money. I would have bought this car. I would have got this watch. I would look this good on Instagram. You know what I mean? I would have just what you want in life. And here I am living in this little room in my early 30s, working for a church. And then I was like, this sucks. And I tell you, I wrestled with doubt. And it wasn't easy. It was a test of, it was hard, especially. So I tried to stay away from social media, So that was hard. And I'm just telling you, you'll wrestle with doubt at some point in your life, okay? So the doubts of unanswered questions, okay? So what do you do with this? Okay, for me, I don't know the answer to the more personal things that you go through. That's really hard. I don't have it. God has to do that work. But I believe in kind of a spectrum of pursuing clarity and surrendering to mystery. Okay, what does that mean? Pursuing clarity means try to figure out, if you have theological questions, work through them, reason through them. How does predestination, how does God choosing us impact us choosing Him? Does that actually happen that way? If you have doubts about how old the earth is it really 6,000 years or 6 million years? Could it really be, does that mean stuff in the Bible isn't factual, or is it more poetic? Did God really create us, or are we evolved? Those things can be dealt with, and pursue clarity means read, think, reason, look at the evidence, connect with people. So pursue clarity. Does that make sense? Don't just give up and say, God knows, I won't bother. That's not helpful, okay? But in pursuing clarity, surrender to mystery, meaning come to a point where you can understand some things I cannot understand. So don't just surrender to mystery, because then you just don't think. And that's not helpful. What's the answer to this? Just pray. What's the answer to this? Just trust God. You know what I mean? That's not helpful for people. But what is helpful is if you've wrestled, thought, tried to figure, read books, discuss, look at opposing views, and you still don't really have a crystallized thought process, and then you say, you know what, I'm just going to trust God, then that sounds very different to every answer is just trust God. Does it make sense? One, you've really pursued. The other, you've just kind of, whatever. Okay? And some things, some doubts that you might have in this room today will be gone. Doubts can be resolved. But I am telling you, if you have doubt in your heart, that can be dangerous for your spiritual life. The Israelites were meant to go into the promised land during the age of Moses, and what should have taken about 2 weeks took them 40 years. Why? Because they doubted the character of God. When God said, go take the promised land, they were like, but God, there are giants here. We can't do this. God, you know what you're trying to do. You're trying to kill us, aren't you? Why don't we just die in Egypt? Oh, it would have been a lot better if we just died in Egypt. Doubt. Okay? So I'm just saying, doubt in regards to the character of God. Doubts, some theological ones, they need to be addressed. Okay? Ask people, talk to people, and just don't ever sweep them under the rug. It's not good for people to say, you have doubts, you should not just sweep it under the rug. That's really unhelpful spiritually, because that only allows your doubt to fester and grow. Okay? Doubts of unanswered questions. Even the psalmists have doubts. God purposely recorded doubts. Continue. Okay, next one is the disillusionment of unanswered prayers. Okay, disillusionment with unanswered prayers. This is like when you've prayed and asked God and things haven't worked out the way you thought He said He would do things. You get disillusioned with your faith. I can tell you when I was when I was serving in a church with young adults, the number of people who were, God told me to marry you. Right? Now, I'm not against God told me. I do think God can do that sometimes. But I'll just tell you, if God has really spoken, don't tell that person. But the number of people who had that and said it publicly and on stage, guess what? None of them got married to the person they said God told them to marry. Now, if you're really unhealthy in your faith will be shaken. Because your faith is almost like resting on, God told me to marry this person and it didn't happen, so does God exist? Okay, there are other options to that, you know. But the disillusionment that can come with that, okay? So for those of you who are wanting to get married or single, okay, if God can speak, but don't go and tell the person God told me. After it happens, then you can say it. I felt like as if God wanted us to be together. But don't go around like just, okay. And if you've done that and it's working out, good for you. But like if I'm just saying, there's wisdom in that, okay? There's just wisdom in that. And also for some people who've had really miraculous pairings, like dreams and visions, and it really aligned, it's not like guaranteed things will work out. Relationships are not just, oh, God said, so I don't have to put in any work. It will definitely work out. That's not how it works, okay? For some people who've had that, God putting people together, they still have to work at that relationship, okay? Anyways, I'm not talking about relationship. Okay, so my point is this. Disillusioned, meaning what's really going on with God? Like, I don't get it. Someone who's disillusioned with God is Job, okay? You guys know Job? Job 6, 1-5, Job says this, then Job answered and said, oh, that my vexation were weighed. You know what vexation means? Like you're vexed. Not hexed. But what's vexed, Julia, English teacher? If I'm vexed. Upset, okay. Any other definitions? I'm greatly vexed. Confused. So the idea is confused, right? Like, I don't know what's going on. So he's saying, my confusion, my don't understand what's going on, or I would maybe say disillusioned, if my vexation were weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balances. So, Job had a lot of things happen. He was a good guy going through bad things. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. So he's trying to paint a picture, very poetic, of how absolutely confused with God he is. Disillusioned. He's trying to be faithful to God, but then, all his property was gone. His sons and daughters were killed. Only his wife remained, and his body was with sores everywhere. Therefore my words have been rash, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. That's what he says. You see, one thing I like about the Bible is very real, isn't it? He just expresses the real emotion. It's not all happy, clappy, everything's going well. He's like, man, God has pierced me, and the terrors of God are around me. And he's like, my vexation, my confusion, if you could weigh it, it's like the sand in the earth, which is a lot of sand. Meaning, this is how absolutely confused I am with what's happening in my life. Okay? So, the reality is, there will be moments of disillusionment. Circumstances that happen that will make us feel disillusioned. Prayers that we pray that we seem like, what is God doing? We prayed and we asked, but nothing has happened. And here is my point about this. How do you help someone if they are disillusioned? Okay. Firstly, sometimes these disillusionments will shipwreck someone's faith. All right? But for those who stay faithful to God in the midst that Job was disillusioned. He was angry and he complained and he was talking about how God is like this and like that. But at the end of the day, he remained faithful, right? But the point is this: one reason God lets that happen is that those moments of disillusionment are an opportunity to deepen and mature in our faith. So, I don't know how to explain it, but this guy called Horatio Spafford, he wrote the song, "It Is Well With My Soul." You know that hymn? It is well with my soul, it is well. I think it was on a trip, he stayed in Chicago, his family were on their way to Europe, and whilst crossing the Atlantic, 226 people died on the steamship Val du Havre, and his 4 daughters died. Okay? His 4 daughters died on that ship. So what do you do when that happens? How do you deal with that? Now, I don't have an answer, but what I do know is that in those moments when we are disillusioned, when it feels like prayers are not answered, those are certain moments where our faith is tested to a point where we actually deepen. And when you hear that person's story, that "it is well with my soul" guy's story, and that's what happened to him, it's a picture of a faith that's more mature than the circumstances that we face. And I believe God's agenda for us is actually we need to go deeper than, our faith needs to go deeper than good circumstances. It's easier to follow God when circumstances are good, but the faithfulness to God needs to transcend good circumstances. Make sense? Right? But yeah, look, there's no easy answer for any of these. Okay? There isn't an easy answer. I'm just telling you, warning you, right? These things can happen, and these are some key barriers. Okay, the next key barrier is the depravity of ungodly living. The depravity of ungodly living. David actually talks about this, Psalm 32 verse 4, about the impact of sin in his own soul. And he says, how my strength is gone. My strength is sapped because of sin. Now we know David was a sinner. All of us are sinners, but David, he was a sinner, okay? And if we want to grow in our spiritual life, understanding and knowing and being aware of this, that intimacy with God, growing in our faith, my pastor says it this way: we can't walk with God and hold hands with the devil. We can't walk with God and hold hands with the devil. But if there is addressing the sense of depravity or sinfulness in our lives, it's to say, God, I bring this before you, and please help me. Some people will say, I want to grow my faith. I don't know why I don't get anything out of reading the Bible for myself. I go to church and, I don't get any kind of encounters with God. Fair enough. Sometimes that is because, why is my spiritual life so drained? It's because for David, it says, sin has sapped me of that strength. Walking with God, personal holiness is so key to spiritual vibrancy. So one of the reasons why there's a barrier to continually growing, not that God doesn't love you, not that you're not saved, but intentionally walking with God in holiness is actually really important. One of the greatest barriers, or one of the greatest breakthroughs you can have in your personal devotional life is whatever sin is in your heart will be addressed. And you'll see when that gets resolved, boom, something will happen. One of my mates at the time, he was dating a non-Christian, and I know he was struggling with his faith, but I was just there for him and stuff. And I tell you, and I'm not even exaggerating, the moment, and I'm not, it's a complicated issue, and I never told him to break up, although he knew what I thought, but I wasn't like, oh, break up. That's not nice, I was just like, okay, bro, I'm here for you, man. Anytime, anything you need, I'm always here for you. The moment he broke up, I tell you, his spiritual life just went a whole new level, and now he's like a key leader in this quite large church, actually. You know? It was like as soon as it broke off, boom, it just unleashed him and his spiritual. He would say it's night and day. And you can tell him to read the Bible as much as you want. It's not going to happen. It's not going to change much unless you deal with this. Your spiritual life isn't going to change much unless you deal with whatever depravity or sin that has you. Come to church as much as you want, whatever. Read the Bible, doesn't matter. If you deal with this, all right, whatever unforgiveness, whatever bitterness, whatever hatred, whatever sexual immorality, whatever it might be, as soon as you deal with this, your spiritual life will make an impact. That's one of the best things you could do in your spiritual life. I could force you to read the Bible 3 hours a day, whatever. It won't matter that much unless there's real change in that area. Okay, you cannot walk with God and hold hands with the devil. Okay, well. Moving on. Okay, next one is the decline of an undisciplined life. The decline of an undisciplined life. 1 Timothy 4:8, train yourselves for godliness, for bodily training is of some value. Godliness is of value in every way as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. Paul here talks about our spiritual life in terms of physical exercise. That's the picture. Okay? He is... In the same way you train your physical muscles, you go to the gym, you have to train your spiritual muscles. And Paul is telling Timothy, I want you to train your spiritual muscles. So this is not like the depravity of depravity of ungodly living. This is more like the slow burn. It's not wrong, but I just game all day long. I was playing CS before I came, if I'm very honest with you. It's just watching, binging, and that's all you do with your life. And it's not wrong, it's not sinful, it's just a slow decline. And I believe in our spiritual life, like a physical body, either moving forward or moving backwards. If I'm hitting the gym 3 times a week, I'm actually getting healthier. I go to the gym only once a week. After 3-4 days, I can feel like my body's actually shrinking, like a little bit of muscle atrophy. And if I don't go for like a month, I will feel it. And when I go back to the gym after a month, my body will be like I'm dying. Like, make sense? And likewise with your spiritual life. It's either growing and getting healthier, or it's actually atrophying, spiritual atrophy. Your soul and your heart and your spiritual being is actually getting smaller and weaker. So you can't think, once, I read the Bible once, or back then. You have to continue exercising. I can't say, a couple of years ago I was super fit. I know, but I'm not as fit as I am physically. I'm not as fit as I am a couple of years ago. But I was once, so it should be fine. Okay, great. But some people do that. They rest in their laurels, like, I was once like this. No, it's today. So I was going to go to the gym today. I didn't go. I was really tired. Went yesterday. I might go tomorrow morning. We'll see how I feel, okay? But physical exercise isn't the top priority for me, okay? I'm not trying to win any awards. I just want to stay physically fit. All right? So the decline of an undisciplined life. Paul takes this very seriously. For him, this spiritual well-being, spiritual health is a top priority. 1 Corinthians 9, 24, 27, he talks about how important it is for you to take your spiritual life seriously. So the other thing is the decline. So I just slowly decline in my spiritual life. Slowly take small compromises, and before you know it, I read the Bible like 5 times a couple of years ago, and that's it. But not anymore. That was back then. It's just bits and pieces. You lose ground, okay? So the decline of an undisciplined life. Discipline is actually quite key in your personal devotion and development, okay? All right, lastly is the distractions of an unfocused life. The distractions. So this means, and we all understand distractions. Phone, distraction, TV, computer, friends, social media, etc. All of it, right? We all get distracted, okay? What happens is because we have no focus, there's a lack of focus, what is it that I want to focus my heart and my energy on in my spiritual life? In the absence of that kind of direction, just every distraction will take our attention. It'll just take our fancy kind of thing. And this is why later on I'll say be intentional, write down some personal steps. I know we've done that before, but you can do it later again. So just write down some personal things I want to, that's intentionality. Because if you're not intentional with something, how many of you know that you'll just get easily distracted? I'm sure some people here go to the gym, right? Okay, great. If you want to go to the gym, you have to say, all right, I'm going to go every day at, 5 p.m., okay? I'm going to go every day 5. That's intentional. Or you could say, I want to get fit. And then you just do whatever. 5 o'clock. Oh, look at this TV show. Oh, my friend's online. Okay, I'm going to play games. Oh, look at this new thing. I'm going to go shopping. Oh, what do you want to do? Yeah, I'm free at 5 o'clock. Let's go. Where are you going? Let's have dinner. And nothing will change. Does that make sense? There's no intentionality. You have a goal, but it's so fuzzy. So I suppose focus is being intentional. And that way, when you're intentional, you'll actually say no to the distractions. If you don't know what you're intentional about, you're going to say yes to every distraction that you want to distract yourself with. So when I did a 40-day prayer and fast, I said no to CSGO for 40 days, right? I knew that was like something I get distracted by. And so I said, all right, so I call out what I'm not going to, because I know that's a huge distraction. Okay? So I said, I'm going to cut that off for 40 days. And that was fine. Some people might be television, okay, whatever, social media. My wife cut off Instagram Monday to Friday, I think, something like that, right? So whatever it might be, that's intentional. Or it could be like, I want to pray and fast and really want to grow in God. I'm free for the next 2 hours. Okay, CSGO time. I'm going to play. You know what I mean? It's just, so that's focus. So you need to be, I suppose, one of the things is this is not like a big bad sin, not like depravity, but this is just focus. Okay? All right, I've taken more time than I expected. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys quickly discuss. Okay, out of the 6 barriers into reading the Bible regularly or your health of spiritual life, which one spoke to you the most? Okay, so I want you to break it into groups, discuss. You can name more than one actually. Out of the 6, I'll go back, here are the 6. Okay, which one is like, yeah, that's me, guys. That's me. That's me. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes and, okay, go ahead, start. Break of, I don't know, if you have cell groups or your cell group leaders could just try to organize a little bit and then discuss, and I want to hear some reflections from people. Okay?
Yeah, that's good.
I with the doubts one, I just always encourage, whenever you're having small groups or discussions, always welcome people to ask hard questions. So I have a Bible study with non-Christians, and I tell them, you don't have to agree with what Jesus says, you don't have to agree with what I say, but thank you for showing up and ask the questions. And I tell you, firstly, they love it. Okay, they really look forward to this Bible study more than me sometimes. Okay, for me, it's hard because they ask such good questions. Right, the questions are so hard. I'm not ready for some of these questions. So I've got a full-blown commentary next to me. I'm just copying and pasting and sending stuff to them and trying to work through stuff. Sometimes when they ask an easy one, I'm like, oh yes, thank God. But my point is, that's healthy. And most of them grew up in church. They could never do that, and they kind of left, But they are happy reading the Bible. So if in those contexts, just be open to reading the Bible and say, look, I'm trying to wrestle with it, but it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have some of these big doubts at the moment. That's okay, But when you have that opportunity, the platform, and the space to feel free to say, what's really going on here? If it's biblical or if it's personal in a more one-on-one setting, I think churches can go so far in welcoming those kind of questions. You're not threatened by it. I'm not scared by the question. I might be like, oh, great, it's a good one. I can't answer that one, but thanks for asking. That's sometimes my approach. Sometimes I'll try to wrestle the answer, and then someone else in that group who's not a Christian would give an answer that's better than mine. I'm like, oh man, that's good. Wow, I have a lot to learn. You know what I mean? So I think there's nothing wrong with that. All right? Does that help? Thank you. Make sense? Yep. This group, anything? Any others? Anything else you want to add that wasn't said? Otherwise, we'll continue. Okay, good. All right. So, yeah, disappointment, disillusionment. Did you guys get any disappointments? No disappointment? Wow, good on you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Great. So, anyways, just keep that in mind with what happens in your spiritual life. That these are realities that we will have to face and stuff. Okay. Cool. Moving on. All right. Now I'm going to go into like some of the hows. Okay. Next slide. Sorry, slide's working. Peter. Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Discussion. All right. So method. All right. So now I'm going to just go to some really basic methods. How do you actually make the most of your time reading the Bible? Okay. So I'm going to cover a couple of things. Now, I don't expect you guys to do this every single time you read the Bible, but I'm just saying, if your question is, I've got no idea where to start, what to do, well, here is a simple framework that you can follow. Okay, so firstly, background. If you understand the background of something, it really helps. So if you're reading a book of the Bible, especially like Old Testament prophecies and stuff, if you understand the background, it starts to make sense. Okay, if you know why Paul wrote a certain letter, it really helps. Where he is, it kind of helps. If you know the history of Israel and what's happening and when, what year, it really makes a difference. Okay, get to know the background. Number 2, summarize. Okay, I think this is really, really underrated. I think summarizing is like totally underrated. I was in a leadership thing yesterday, and one of the big ideas that someone said was, I want to read a book with someone. And I said, can I tell you, a book club in a leadership team is totally underrated. Reading a book with someone and sharing reflections is so good. You know. Anyways, so this is what summarizing is. It's massively underrated. I haven't heard people talk about it as much, but if you can put the Bible, if you've read something, and you can say, oh, this is kind of what it's saying, that's huge. Okay? That's very different to reading what someone else said. That's very different to just reading it. But you can actually articulate in your own words what you think you just read. Huge. Summarizing is a huge one. If you just did summarizing when you read the Bible, huge win. In my opinion, big win. You know? If you've read the Bible and you say, what did you read about? Well, actually, what did I read? Today I read Luke. And I can tell you what Luke's about. Well, not the entire book, but the passage. I can't remember the chapter, but I can tell you the content. Jesus sends out the 72. He firstly appoints the 72, and then he sends the 72, and then they go. And then when they go, Jesus gives them very clear instructions. He tells them, you'll meet a person of peace, and if they welcome you, your peace will be with them. And if they don't welcome you, your peace will return to you. So I'm scratching my thinking, what? My peace can just leave and come back? Is that how it works? So I don't have that answer, but that's what I read about. And then Jesus said, then go and heal the sick. It doesn't say pray for the sick, you actually just go and do it. I'm like, what? You just go and heal the sick? And then tell them the kingdom of God is near. Is that it? Yeah. Go in, heal the sick, tell them the kingdom of God is near. And he goes 2 by 2. Don't take money, don't take other stuff. Just go and do it. And when they came back, Jesus actually said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. And they was like, whoa. They were like, I can't believe what happened. That's what I read, okay? I'm not preaching a sermon on it. All I'm saying is I can articulate to you what I read. Do you know what I mean? I can tell you in my own words. If you can do that, that's huge. Huge. Okay? If all you took out of today is, I'm going to have a go summarizing, that's awesome. Your understanding of the Bible would deepen far more because you've synthesized the knowledge or whatever. Is that right, teachers? Okay, fine. Sorry. But yeah, summarize and synthesize. What is synthesizing then? Oh, I see. Okay. Thanks, Julia. Which is, sorry? It's hard. Okay, good, yep. Okay, synthesizing hard. I'm not saying synthesize, I'm just saying summarize. Okay? But if you can do it, like I literally just can tell you what I just read about. That's good. Okay, I tell you that's what I read, and I had some questions, and I can wrestle with it and write a sermon, but I'm not going to go there. I don't want that. Don't worry about that for now. Okay. After summarize, you can learn. Ask yourself a few questions. What are the principles? Later, you can derive a principle. So if you can derive, like I had 6 things right there, 6 principles. Whatever, depravity. Who can remember the six things I just talked about? The barriers of what? Oh, very good. Okay, anyone have another one? Oh, not bad. Okay, anyone else? Okay, not bad. Life. Yeah, okay. Another one? Okay, yeah, and then another one? Yep. One more. Yeah, that's right. Depravity of an ungodly. Yeah, but fair enough. Good, nice. Good, but that's a principle, you see, like a one-liner that it's like a banger one-liner. And that actually takes a bit of time to figure out. You can't just pull principles out of nowhere, Here are some principles. No. It's just those one-liner, banger one-liners is just that takes, I think, synthesis is the right word to use. Yes? It's looking at it, thinking about it, mulling over it, and deriving and analyzing, deriving something out of it, okay? If you can get to a principle, good on you. You share your devotion. Or in the Bible I read, I don't know, God reveals himself to those who wait upon him. I don't know, whatever. And you say it in one line, it just has a lot more, you've really dealt with it, okay? And people are like, wow, that's really good. So if you're preaching, some of you guys who preach, if you can derive some principles, it's really good. Finally, apply. Okay, so then do what you're learning. So sometimes people just immediately say, what is this saying to me and what should I do? I say don't do that so quickly, because sometimes the Bible isn't directly speaking to you. Sometimes, okay? I believe it can. I believe you read the Bible and there will be a word that speaks to you. My point is sometimes we just read it and be like, what is God saying to me? Sometimes that's not the case. But if you can understand how God is speaking to the people who are there, and if you get an understanding of that, then you derive a principle. That principle you can apply. Okay, so for example, the famous verse, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, the plans for good and not for evil, plans to prosper you, not to harm you. I think it's something like that, okay? And you can't, what's not good is you claim that for yourself and say, yes, that's for me. Maybe that's not for you. Maybe that's not your season. Your season is a wilderness season. Your season is not a season of prosperity right now. But you can't just go and be like, that's mine. No. But if you look at the passage and then think, okay, firstly, background, Israel was in exile. They're in Babylon. Okay, that's the summarize. Well, God says, I will bless you. That's what he's saying. What do you learn? What I learn is when these guys are in exile, God gives his greatest promise. That's a principle, okay, And you can preach that and make it sound really nice if you want to grow as a preacher. I learned in the darkest moments, God gives his greatest promises, whatever, right? Then you can apply it. When I go through a hard time, in those moments, I believe God will give me his promises. That's far better. Make sense? That's way healthier. That's far more so when you go through it, you can look, I don't know what you're going through, I don't know why, but I just know that how God operates is when we're going through something really hard. Sometimes it's that's when he wants to give us his principle, or his great promise. Look what he did to Israel. They were they had no more land. They were like refugees that have left their motherland, which they owned and they conquered, but now they're refugees. And they don't even, some of them, when they're in Babylon, they started to forget their identity as Israelites, as the people of God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But it's there that God gives Jeremiah 29:11. It gives it a lot more richness. So how do you apply this? Well, for some of us here if you want to share your reflection with a life group or a sermon, you can say, for some of us who go through a hard time, what I know about God is God will give you his promise in the middle of your hard time. That's so much better. As opposed to, I don't care, today is your day, God is going to prosper you, everyone's going to be prosperous, everyone's going to get a GTR later. You know what I mean? That's not going to happen, all right? Maybe one person will, but anyway, I'm just kidding. Sorry, bro. Okay, I was going to do a lot of application here, but maybe you guys do the application when you guys do life groups. But okay, in light of this, what do you do? Okay, each one. Background, here are some questions you can ask for background. Who wrote this? Sometimes it's, if you don't know the author, it's okay, but if you know who the author is, it helps. When was it written? Why was it written? And what's the target audience? Okay, now again, you don't have to do this for every time you read the Bible. I would do this if I'm studying a new book. So for example, anyone here read 1 Chronicles? Ever? Okay, good. How many of you know how 1 Chronicles begins? Anyone know how it begins? Google it if you want. Any guesses? It begins. Okay. How many chapters of genealogies are there in 1 Chronicles? You don't know? Roughly? 10. Okay, now, if you have biblical real estate, right, why do you want to spend 10 chapters on genealogy? I mean, isn't that a bit of a waste of time? I mean, no offense, you could have written about something a bit more fruitful. Make sense? Now, how was your devotion? I was meditating on 1 Chronicles chapter 1 to 10. Wow, so good. You know, one time I had to preach on a genealogy. It literally had a list of names from Ezra, and the church gave that to preach to me. I was like, thanks guys. No joke. I had to know every single person. I was looking for like a shred of like, is there someone here? Anyways, at the end of the day, I remember I read the verse and people started clapping afterwards. That was it. And then I just tried to say something about them. But why do they have 10 chapters of genealogies? How'd you do that? You see, if you understood the background, it makes perfect sense. Why? Who wrote this? I think it may have been Ezra. Okay? Ezra, you know, Ezra, Nehemiah, that Ezra. When was it written? It was written after they came back to Israel after Babylon, post-exile. Make sense? Okay? So why was it written? Okay, because after spending 70 years in Babylon, they suffered from doubts of unanswered questions. What were they doubting? What do you think they would have doubted? What would you have doubted? 70 years in Babylon, what do you think you would start doubting? Put yourself in their shoes. What would you do? What would you doubt? No, don't worry. Any answer is fine. God's promises? What else would you doubt? Okay, I would doubt if God is with you, right? I would doubt, are we really the Israelites? What has God done in our lives? Imagine growing up, some of us went through all of us probably went through Melbourne COVID. I just realized how bad it was. I'm sorry. It wasn't as bad in Singapore. But anyways, some people were born in the exile. Some people, born into COVID. That's what they know. So they were, yeah, exactly. So they would be asking, who are we? Where's our heritage? And that's why he spends 10 chapters writing about where you're from. Make sense? And then it's like, I'm reminding you that you have a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That God was there. These guys are your forefathers. This is your ancestry. And then he records the same stuff as 1 and 2 Kings. But it's written, same events, but written with that group in mind. So some stories are longer, some stories are shorter. Because he's trying to tell them, this is where you come from. This is your God. Make sense? Now all of a sudden, these 10 chapters are really good. wouldn't you want to know where you came from if that was your situation? Make sense? Background. Okay, that's why background is important. All right. Okay, next one. Okay, what are some key messages of this book? Yep. Okay, sorry, that was the other one. Yep. The key messages of 2 Chronicles is about the history of Israel. Okay, chronicled stuff. All right. I would love to give you guys a break and do this, but I'm just going to cover the material, and you guys could do this in life group. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Next one. Summarize. I just shared with you. Try to put in your own words. Use dot points or prose. Try to explain to someone else what you just read without looking at your notes. Okay? Something you can try maybe later if we have some time. Okay? Summarize. Next one is learn. Okay, is there something that I haven't noticed before? So you read it like, oh, what did I not notice about this passage that I haven't before? Okay? It could be, what did I learn about God? Is a good question. All right? Next one is, what did I learn anything about myself? God can speak to you about a situation. What did I learn about myself? Oh, okay. So this is quite key. So if you can get to this place and try this, even if you try just once a week, you might not get much the first time, but you might get a little bit more the next time. And God will speak to you about himself, and God would speak to you about you. There might be something going on and you realize, oh man, I better do something about this or whatever. Okay? Cool. So we've got background. Summarize, learn. Okay, next one is principle. This is deriving a one-liner. If you can succinctly capture what you've learned in one sentence, that takes time to wordsmith, but it's actually quite powerful. So a principle that is quite good that I think about a lot. My pastor, I didn't come up with this, my pastor says this. Think big, build deep, start small. Think big, start small, build deep. So if you're doing a ministry, think big, have big vision, have big plans, but start small. Start with a few people and build deep. Isn't that good? So right now I have a lot of start smalls. Some people's problem is they can't start with small, they have to start with big. No, start with small. Some people, I can't think big, learn to think big. And some people never build deep, learn to build deep. So I added on to that little tagline, and I said, be secure enough to start small, be bold enough to think big, and be wise enough to build deep. It's nice, huh? Yeah? You see, these little principles are good, huh? Another one, that again, not from me, from one of my pastors in Singapore. Take care of the depth of your life, which is this spiritual stuff. Take care of the depth of your life, and God will take care of the breadth of your ministry, meaning how many people you'll reach. So this is probably aimed for pastors and stuff, okay? So if you take care of your inner life and your inner world really well, God will take care of how much reach you'll have. Not that that's something you should strive for, but you know what I mean? So come up with these little, if you can come up with that, which is really hard, it's good. You know, little slogans to live by, okay? Okay, finally, apply is something I need to do in light of what I read. What do I do? And, okay, I said be careful not to jump into this too fast. Okay, great. All right, so that's all I have for today. I know that some of you guys are probably a little bit tired, so I'm going to get you guys to have a go at this. Maybe not all 5, okay, but I might try just maybe the summarize bit. How's that? Just the summarize bit, okay? Cool? So I'm thinking, can we break off into groups of 3s or 2s? And I'm going to give you a passage each. And you can read it together. Don't worry about the others, learn, principle, apply. And then after you read it, you can, choose one person from your group of 2 or 3 to summarize. That's it. If you want to take the next step and give a principle, great. If you want to go the next and give a learning, great. Okay? But just start with learning to summarize, exercise that part of your mind in your spiritual growth. All right? You guys okay? What did you notice about the way you read over the past 10 minutes versus how you normally read? Sorry? You pause? What else did you notice? Compared, if I just said read this versus I want you to summarize, what do you notice? You can't skim. Very good. What else? Attention to detail. Fantastic. What else? Yep. You're reading out aloud. Yep. Anything else? This is why I think summary is so good. Because if I said, okay, guys, next 10 minutes, feel free to read this chapter. You just skim through, oh, yeah, I've read this before. I know what's going on here. Everyone knows what this story is. Okay. But now if you summarize, you can't do that. You're like, oh, man, I better read this like twice at least. I better read every word. Your attentiveness is much higher. And if your attentiveness is much higher, you'll get so much more out of it. I've just given you 10 minutes, that's all. And I'm not even asking you to do the other stuff. But I'm telling you, this is why summarizing is key. Cool? We all good? Okay, so Joshua chapter 1, please can stand and do first. And then we're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, chapter 1 can start. Go. Thank you. Do you need a microphone? Take a microphone, yes. Let's take blue. Okay, yes. Thank you, Jay. You can stand up as well.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so Joshua chapter 1, the summary is that Moses has passed away now, and Joshua is inadvertently appointed to be the next Moses. And God pretty much tells Joshua to cross the Jordan River and promises Joshua what he promised Moses, the promised land for the Israelites. And he gives Joshua words of encouragement and wisdom with a very strong, heavy theme of being bold, being courageous, not being fearful, whilst he crosses the river and claim the promised land. But above all of this, to not forget that God will be with him wherever he goes, just as he was with Moses. So then Joshua relays the exact same words of wisdom and message that God's given him to the officers and the people that he's leading, to do the same thing, pretty much saying telling the soldiers or whoever he's leading, so you do the same thing, you guys get ready for camp, be ready to cross the Jordan River, but to a specific group of tribes in the camp, the Manasseh, Reubenites, and the Gadites, which I don't really know why. I think that's why background is important, but he tells us three groups of tribes and remind us specifically, you three, please cross the Jordan River along with all the other people in the camp. I know that God has promised you a land in the east of Jordan, but you must help the rest of the people fight, battle, whatever it may be, until the rest of us can find rest, and then you can go back to the land that God has promised you and given you already. So that's the promise that, I guess that's a reminder that Joshua has directed these three specific groups of people. And then in return, these tribes respond similarly in terms of saying that, we will do whatever you tell us to do, just as what Moses has told us to do, because we know that God's with you and that God has chosen you to be our next Moses, per se. So that's a summary of chapter 1.
Very good, okay. Thank you, Jay. Chapter 2. You can stand up as well.
If I stand up, it doesn't make a difference, I'm sure. Not much difference. I'll stand up here. Chapter 2, leading on from chapter 1. So Joshua is now the leader of the Israelites, and they've reached a point where they're approaching some of the land. I don't know which way to face. Approaching some of the land that God has promised to the Israelites, which is already inhabited. So specifically the land of Jericho. And Joshua decides to send 2 spies into this land. And somehow the king of Jericho finds out that there are Israelite spies in his land. And the spies, they hide in a prostitute's house. Her name's Rahab. And the king's men, either they're going around to their houses or they have a hunch that the Israelites are there, and they say, "Hey, you woman, give us these spies." And the woman lies to the king's men, saying, "No, no, no, I don't know who these people are. They've left already. Like, they've gone outside. Go that way, like outside of the city walls." And then the king's men leave, and then the woman goes back into her house where she hid the spies, and she says, "Oh, I've sent these men away because I've heard about the Israelite people and your power and your strength that God has given you." She describes all of the things that the Israelites have already done. They've conquered certain lands and things like that. And she says, "Oh, I know of God's power and promises to your people, and I know that God has promised this land to the Israelites." And then she asked for protection. She said, "I lied to these men. I've shown you kindness, so please show me kindness back. Protect me and my family." And then the spies make a promise to her. They say, "Yep, okay, we will pay you back this kindness because you've protected us." Then the spies leave out the city walls, and they give her like this red rope to signal that this is her house. And then the spies return back to Joshua and report about what has happened. And the key part at the end is that they acknowledge that, yes, this is surely God's promise is true, because the people of this land already know about what God has done and how powerful he is. And I think the sort of theme of this chapter was like the fear and the power of God.
Very good. Awesome. Fantastic. So I'm not going to go into it, but a point of question was like, so is God okay with lying? Okay, so I'm not going to go into that, but in nutshell, in that case, the answer is yes. Okay, but I'm not going to, I know that raises more questions, doubts of unanswered questions. I've given you another doubt to deal with. Anyways, okay. Chapter 3.
So our chapter was
You can stand up as well if you want. Thank you.
Our chapter was about how the Israelites, they crossed the Jordan River. Basically at the start, Joshua kind of groups them together and lets them know that they're going to cross the river, and he gives out instructions of how they're going to do it. And then after that, he tells them to be prepared because tomorrow Lord's going to do like great things to them. And then God actually talks to Joshua and tells him, "I'm going to show all the Israelites that you're like the chosen one, just to like make it known that I'm with you the way I was with Moses." So he told Joshua to like stand at the edge of the river, and then basically at the end, all the Israelites get to cross the river on dry land. And during that time, it was like flooding, but because I think they had like the Ark of the Covenant in the middle, and then like the water like split, and they could cross the way like Moses guided them through the Red Sea. So yeah, I guess it's kind of like God was showing the Israelites that he's still with them in this one, and that just because Moses wasn't with them anymore, like that doesn't mean that God's not with them, is what I got.
Great, thank you. So you can compare this crossing and the Red Sea crossing, and there are similarities and there are differences. But yeah, okay, good. Chapter 4.
So chapter 4 picks up from chapter 3 and continues on the story, and it's about how then God talks to Joshua, and Joshua asks the elders from the 12 tribes to collect some stones from the Jordan River and to build a memorial. And the memorial is just a way for the future generations and for them to remember, I guess, the miracles and what God has done. And yeah, that's it.
Very good. Thanks, Wilson. Very good. Okay, chapter 5. Who's chapter 5? Okay, here. This one. Let's go, Mick.
Hi. So chapter 5 is the 5th chapter of Joshua in the Bible,
Yes.
which comes after chapter 4, before chapter 6.
Yeah, good. Continue.
So pretty much, it talks. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so it talks about circumcision. So yeah, so the beginning in the new land, the male population had to get the skin cut off.
Yes.
So the first Passover of the land was in Gilgal.
Yep.
And talked about the commander of the Lord's army. So I said, at the time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. And so further down, it says, all the people that came out have been circumcised, but all the people born in the desert during the journey from Egypt was not. And yeah, so after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Further down, so Joshua was near Jericho. So he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and said, are you for us or for our enemies? And that's kind of where I got off to.
Okay, good. Very good. Very good. Thanks, Mick. So the commander of the Lord's armies actually says, I'm neither for you nor against you. Okay? All right? Okay, chapter 6. Is this the last one? And are you guys 7? Oh, I gave us 7. Okay, great. I forgot. Okay. Chapter 6, yes.
Yeah, so in chapter 6, the Israelites were locked out of Jericho, and Joshua receives some pretty precise instructions from God, which he relays to, the Israelites. He tells them that he tells the soldiers and the priests who will be carrying horns and trumpets that they'll march around Jericho for 7 days, but for the first 6 days they are, not to shout or say anything, whatever. And then on the 7th day, Joshua instructs them to all shout, and when they do, God will pull the walls down or blow it up or whatever.
So I guess what I got out of it was that, obviously with the instruction that had been given as well, it was obviously something that would have had to take a lot of faith, because
Yep.
it is just an instruction. Like, I guess they really do emphasize in the verses like that they get up at daybreak, and it sounds like, all right, there's an early start, this is what we're going to do, why are we doing this for a week? And then I guess, on the 7th day when the walls do come down, there was a level of faith that they had to, shout as well. And they're also given specific instruction to not to, so this, I'm not sure about this, but I tried Googling a bit more. What?
Not take gold, bronze, or silver.
No, they want to take it.
No, it said leave it, bro.
No, they said leave everything else, bro. You dumbass. So
It's okay, continue, yes, good.
That, like,
And good to know that you're getting the details in as well. Can you see if you, anyways, continue? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess what I was trying to research into was what I guess the city of Jericho represented, because obviously there was a specific instruction not to, touch anything of theirs and to burn it all down. Otherwise, that would bring the destruction, or the Israelites would be liable for destruction or something like that. And that sort of, as far as I got into, I couldn't really find out as to why specifically. But I guess they further emphasize that by even cursing it, like anyone who attempts to rebuild Jericho, or maybe the idea of Jericho even, they'd be cursed with the death of the firstborn, and then trying to build up the gates, they'd be cursed with losing the secondborn or something as well like that. So that's as far as I got in the 10 minutes we had.
Okay, thanks, James. Now you went beyond just reading the passage. And that's another point of question. Like, why does God tell people to do that? Why does he complete destruction? I'm not going to try to answer that today, but good. Thank you. Fantastic. Thanks, James. Okay. And sorry, Steve, is it? And Steve as well. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, last group, chapter 7, and then we're going to end. Mark, go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Mr. GTR. Yep, sorry, continue.
All right, so in summary, all right, using a key barrier.
For
Sorry?
using your key barriers for extra points.
Summarize.
Never mind.
What do you say?
So in summary, right, the Lord God was not happy with the Israelites because of their depravity of ungodly living.
It's not a competition, but okay.
Yeah, essentially, like the Israelites were unfaithful, and yeah, regarding doing ungodly things, in summary, and God pretty much just said, "Yeah, I won't be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you guys that you've devoted your efforts to," and so they did, and yeah, that's it.
Good. Okay, so I think that's the... Thanks, Mark. Thanks for trying to use fancy words. But I think that's the battle of AI. Okay, is that right? The battle of AI, is that correct? Okay, and then, so one guy called Achan, or Achan, he took an idol, and then they lost that battle. That's it. Okay, but great. Thank you guys so much. So I noticed when you guys are summarizing, the attention to details there. Okay, you pay more attention, and I can actually encourage you. I'm listening. There are even a few more details that you can pay attention to. So when you realize when you're summarizing, you're kind of saying it, but you're second guessing. Actually, is that right? But you're saying it, but you're thinking of. So have a think about what you said and read it again, just to make sure what you said was actually a reflection of what it was actually going on. Was it going on? But the point was, which I'm very grateful, the level of attention, mentally as well as the attention to detail, is much higher. And you get so much more out of it. You guys did that in 10 minutes for one chapter, which is fantastic.